Welcome to the Edge. Hey, Jay, it's March. Dang, the year's flying by. I feel like it might just be the first week of January. We've got a bunch of stuff coming up. We've got RSA in about a month, Aruba Atmosphere, Black Hat follows after that. It's conference season is going to be kicking into high gear here. But I also know that something you love is starting up, and that's Formula One.
Yeah, so this weekend was first race of the season in Bahrain. Been a fan pretty much all of my life. The reasons behind that really are because when I was young, my parents divorced. I was 8 years old. It was a passion of my dad's. He loved motorsport, and Formula One was one of those parts of motorsport he loved. It was something that we did. We did every Saturday. We sat down and we watched kind of qualifying. And then on the Sunday, we would sit down and watch the race. And it was something he really enjoyed, which meant I really enjoyed it. It enabled us to bond. And it's really what ended up with why I ended up with a Lotus Elise, so you can see in this picture. And that made me and my dad bond even more. I mean, I bought it in my early 20s. It was a completely on a whim purchase. I mean, I went to buy a sensible kind of family car across the street. They refused to let me test drive it. I came out and in my annoyance went across the street and drove the Lotus. Loved it so much, put a deposit on it and ended up with it. Completely impractical. It leaks. You can't see in the dark. I've had it 23 years now. And although my father passed away 9 years ago, it is now, we built some incredible memories in it. I remember taking him away for his birthdays and for Father's Day. And we drove across the Alps. We drove through the Pyrenees. We drove through the Dolomites. I did a lot of track days in it. So now I still sit down and watch the Formula One. I'm quite a big Mercedes fan, having worked there for a while for a period of time. They're not doing particularly great. They didn't do particularly great the last couple of years. The car looks a bit of a dog this year as well. But it was an exciting race yesterday, and I'm looking forward to further races kind of this year. So I'm also a huge fan of the cycling, as are you. So I'm looking forward to the cycling kind of kicking off now. I think the Tour de France is going to be a really interesting one this year. I think the young guns are back out and going to go at it again. So have you been up to anything other than like fighting the snow in the ice?
No, it's been the snowpocalypse here in Portland. We've gotten snow, threat of snow. Kids have been home. We had some good sledding times a week or so ago, but yeah, the weather hasn't been as cooperative. And getting outside, yeah, the best I can do is walk the dog right now. So I'm a bit going stir crazy. If you cabin fever is big in my head right now. So
Yeah.
I'm ready to get out, ready for some some skies and getting out on the road and hitting the bike trails. That's where I'm at. But talking about other races, the race for SASE, we've got Palo Alto Networks just had their earnings release last week, and they crushed it. I mean, if you kind of think about it, revenues rose by 26% to $1.7 billion. The expectation for the share was to hit earnings of 78 cents. They came in at $1.05. And yeah, they crushed their earnings. Stock was up almost 12%. They also are starting to make that transition from hardware-based to more of a software subscription-based. It was the first time they started reporting their SASE numbers. And the word is they eclipsed $1 billion. So that small little unit that started off as SD-WAN, as remote access, is now clipping in at $1 billion. And they also announced their first $40 million SASE deal. So hitting on all cylinders. And with some AI ops coming up to reduce KTL, having a little trouble here in the morning, to reduce that KTLO load on the staff. So simpler, lower cost consolidation. They crushed it.
I mean, obviously the world's changed. I mean, we've seen this kind of move to cloud over the last couple of years, and I wasn't a massive fan of the cloud. I still don't particularly like the term, to be fair. But I mean, I don't like hybrid cloud and public cloud and private cloud and all of this stuff. It just makes the world of IT complicated. And I was a little bit kind of against the cloud when it first came along, because I was nervous of kind of taking all that stuff that we could put our arms around in our data centers and moving it somewhere else. I mean, IT folks love all those flashing lights. They love tinkering. They love the hardware. And it worried me about moving that risk, moving it outside of something that you had a bit more control over and moving it towards the cloud. And I didn't think it was going to take off. And then it started kind of trickling in, and you had really big companies kind of going with it. But then obviously it started really before the pandemic. But for me, the pandemic kind of sped it up, and people really considered moving to the cloud. And I think what's happened, at least my opinion, is people have moved stuff quite quickly. Innovation came along during the pandemic, massive innovation, great innovation. People move stuff to their users, and their users are no longer in the offices. So they moved stuff out to the edge. And then people are sitting down now and going, oh, how do we secure that now? We've now moved it. We've taken it from our nice cozy data centers where we could look after it. We pushed it to the edge. Great. It's near our users. It's really, really fast. How do we now make sure there's less risk, more security? And for me, SSE, SASE, and the concept of this zero trust that we talk about all the time, all of those are kind of combined, and they all add up to this kind of, let's secure all this stuff we've moved. So now not only do you have users outside your environment, applications are in the cloud, and they're not just kind of SaaS based, their infrastructure as a service and all those other things have been moved. So I just see this as being the skyrocket now. Things are just going to take off. I mean, people are going to move more and more and more to these kind of tools that help them secure their environments. And as we've said many times, it's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think people are beginning to realize that there are tools out there now that can help them with that security. And with things like ransomware and cyber attacks and everything on the rise, there's even more importance in that security kind of element. So I just see this is going further and further. I think we're going to have these kind of updates every quarter, and we're going to be talking about every quarter the numbers got smashed, and I just think this is going to go on for 2, 3, 4 years before everyone's kind of moved over, is my opinion.
No, I think your thought there on how long it's going to take is going to be a little longer. We've talked about this before on this podcast, on other venues, about how this is a 10-year transition. Networking moves in 10-year increments. We're maybe in year one, if that, of SASE. And, some of the analysts in the market are saying, hey, 10% market penetration. It's lower than that. They're probably right. It's likely in the single digits. And the transition is not just like you can move your circuits, in like SD-WAN, it's just not possible to, that's not what it is. It's SD-WAN, it's remote access, it's remaking everything that was on the edge and transitioning those hardware assets to software assets. This is going to take time. It's going to take planning. We're at the cusp of this, but it's interesting that, Palo Alto is calling it out as one of their segments that they're marking and talking about in every one of their earnings releases. $1 billion is a big metric. $40 million SASE deal. It's this transition between physical assets to software assets, and delivered as a service. It's going to take time, and man, the market is eating it up, especially with this headwinds that we're always talking about. This is another area where companies are saying, hey, there's an opportunity to consolidate my portfolio of tools, reduce my costs, increase my protection against cyber attacks, lowering my attack surface. There's just a lot of wins in this space, and man, it's exciting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because Zscaler announced their figures as well. Unfortunately for them, their share price didn't spike. I mean, again, they crushed their numbers. They had another record quarter. Everything went up. But they also mentioned the headwinds, and they also mentioned deals are going to take longer to close. They mentioned that they were laying off some of their staff. It wasn't huge numbers. I think if I remember rightly, it was 3%, like less than 200 people. But their shares went in reverse. They went the other direction. And I always find this a bit quirky in the stock market. I mean, those kind of announcements, you need to be honest. But when you look at the numbers for Zscaler, or at least when I look at the numbers, I'm like, they've absolutely crushed it. They've had a record quarter again. But instead of like Palo going up 10 or 12%. They went down 10%. I don't get it. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, the revenue jumped 52% year over year to $387 million. So that was above the Wall Street expectation. Again, a sales beat, 37% or 37 cents per share, beating the analyst estimates by 8%. But, to your point, where they got the haircut was their deals are slowing down. So as there's more scrutiny, as the C-level folks, the accounting team, the procurement team, so on and so forth, look at renewals, look at new opportunities, that from inception to deal close, that time frame's taken a lot longer. And I think that's where Wall Street was being a little negative on them as well. The layoffs was 3%. They're calling out was about 177 employees. To me, that's not really somewhere where I would grade a company. We're seeing that across the space. During COVID, there was a lot of government incentives to maintain staff. And what we're seeing now in tech and other industries is that companies are doing what they normally do, and they're looking at the workforce, those players that aren't, either they're not in a revenue generating BU, or that BU has struggled, or those people unfortunately just didn't perform. They're being laid off. We see that every year as companies kind of reassess their staffing and look at bringing in some new talent or releasing some of the talent that isn't quite, and I hate to say this, working out. But I think that's what's going on here. So I think Wall Street's been a little hard on Zscaler. They're still crushing it in terms of numbers. The momentum is still there, as well as, Zscaler is expanding their marketplace. They purchased Cantonic Security, which is software as a service, really starting to look at the cloud, CASB, bolstering their CASB portfolio, their security, posture management portfolio. So again, they're doing well. Palo Alto is doing well, and the marketplace for SASE is still super hot.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think for Zscaler is obviously they've kind of owned the market for a long period of time. The pandemic helped them, because obviously the ZTNA portion, I think that was a big driver for a lot of people moving. I think people moved quickly. I think decisions got made really quickly at board level. It's like, we need to go and buy a product to enable our workforce to continue working. So when you said just before that there's more scrutiny, I think we've kind of gone back to the level of scrutiny that companies maybe went through before the pandemic. The pandemic meant that scrutiny kind of went away. But also Zscaler now have more competition. I mean, Palo, clearly, like if their numbers are going up and up and up, they're deals that potentially would have gone to Zscaler historically. And so people are now kind of looking at the market. They're seeing other people coming up. They're seeing kind of the rising stars, the startups. And I think that's possibly taking some numbers away from Zscaler. I mean, to be honest, the ocean is huge. The numbers in the TAM are huge. So I don't think it will have a massive long-term effect. I think the market's big enough for there to be some really, really big fish playing in it. But I definitely think that there's more competition now.
And yeah, the competition came out last week. On Thursday, HPE announced their results. They also announced an intent to acquire SSE startup Axis Security. Terms of the deal, unknown at this time. It was reported in Israeli press as somewhere right around $500 million, but we haven't seen a firm number on that. It's kind of an interesting play for HPE. They purchased their Aruba business unit, purchased Silver Peak several years back for just under $1 billion. But they had a gap in their portfolio. They really didn't have that SSE play. So if you look at SASE as a whole, on one side, you have the delivery of networking services through SD-WAN, other mechanisms. And then on the security side, this what's called SSE stack. That is where Aruba, HPE, Silver Peak was missing on. In one of the articles, they said they were on a 4-year search for a company, a technology to fill in that space. And they settled on a startup out of Israel called Axis Security.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting purchase, I think. There's a lot of companies out there are obviously wanting to get into the SASE market. As you said yourself, HP spent a long time looking for somebody that would fit. We've spent a lot of time on these podcasts talking about kind of that single vendor unicorn. This could potentially be it. You're going to take an extremely good SSE platform and probably the market lead in SD-WAN. I mean, I think Silver Peak, when it's reviewed, is like at least in the top 3, if not the top. It'll be really interesting to see when they bolt those two together. If they can keep it as simple as they both are independently, it's going to change the world.
Absolutely agree. The corner, the upper right corner of the Gartner MQ, I think it's being worked on. I don't know what the time frame is for it to be released, but given the news of last week, definitely has changed. HPE, Aruba definitely made a huge change in where their position is. So that'll be interesting to see when that one comes out and where it's at, and as well as what does HPE Aruba do with access security? How quickly do they integrate it? When do their customers, get that firewall as a service? ZTNA is another hot topic. So this is a space to watch, and that's a company to watch over the next few months to see, how that acquisition plays out.
Yeah. So I think before we wrap, because I think we've talked enough about tech, we need to talk about food. We have Pancake Day in the UK. So Shrove Tuesday, we make pancakes and we put kind of toppings on them. And I guess they're called crepes, I think they call them in France. Do you have such a thing? I think we've talked about it before, and it's kind of coincides with New Orleans, and they do something there, and maybe that's where we get it from, and I don't know the history. Right. But do you do anything kind of?
So Pancake Day, that's news to me. I hadn't heard about it until my wife mentioned it. I think it was last night we were having a conversation. I know that my kids absolutely love pancakes. My daughter, every morning, she's got to have the same breakfast. It is egg whites and these little silver dollar pancakes from Trader Joe's. That is her go-to. So pancakes have always been big, but they're just the standard pancakes. We're not talking crepes. We're not talking, anything special to them. So this is news to me, but maybe I'll partake this week of some pancakes and maybe make some from scratch.
So we do things like we put lemon and sugar on them, or we put raisins in them, or things like Nutella spread or chocolate. You do all kinds of things. So I will definitely, next time I see you, we'll do some pancakes. Very easy to make. But as always, great to talk to you. I mean, I think we're going to do one of these every quarter. Maybe we'll have to do more than that because things are moving so quickly in the industry. But yeah, great. And hopefully anyone that's listening who's going to be around at RSA or Atmosphere or Black Cat, drop us a note. We'd love to see you face to face. We're thinking of doing some live events, some live podcasts. So feel free to reach out and talk to us.
Yeah, and hit the subscribe and follow The Edge on all your major platforms for podcasting, whether that's Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and then also check out the YouTube channel as well. So there's some new great content there. Great interview with John Kindervag, Jim Rivas on Zero Trust, as well as Chase Cunningham. If you have the opportunity to listen to Chase, absolutely amazing. Just start writing down all the phrases that drop out of his mouth. And then finally, Paul Simmons, the amazing Paul Simmons, was interviewed by The Edge as well. And that's out there, talks about how the business side of Zero Trust. So some good stuff out on the YouTube. Check out the channel.
Thank you very much.